Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, October 17th, 2018 Economic Development Commission meeting. Tonight, we are going to, after we get through the housekeeping, discuss business banners, review the council's 2019 legislative agenda, review greater MSP, open to business, and then the economic development strategic plan. This is our agenda for this evening. Do I have any motions to, or any changes to the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone oppose? Not hearing anything. In your packets, you will find the previous meeting minutes from August the 15th. Does anybody have any changes to those meeting minutes? I am not seeing any changes, so I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes as posted.
So moved.
We got a movement
Second.
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone oppose? Great. Well, let's move right into the discussion on business banners. And here to speak on this is Regina Dean. She's our city planner.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. So this particular topic is on your EDC work plan. As directed by the City Council in January of 2018, City Council took a look at a question regarding school banners, and they wanted to allow some flexibility so that schools within the school districts in Burnsville could showcase awards of excellence or an event that's going on during the school year that they wanted to promote. We eventually made some changes to our ordinance to address that, but the topic came up about what do we allow for our businesses? Should we be looking at that too and making some changes? So that was added to your work plan as well as the Planning Commission's work plan to potentially make some changes. So with that, we began conducting some research. We had an intern that conducted a lot of this research that you probably saw in your background packet. We took a look at our existing code and what other cities do in relationship to their sign code, specifically looking at banners and temporary type signs. So we did a market city study where we look at comparable cities like Apple Valley, what Eagan does, St. Louis Park. There's, I think, a list of 8 different cities that we compare ourselves to. So we provided that information. It's in your packets to see where we fell on the spectrum. Are we more flexible than others? Are we too strict? So that's part of the analysis that went into our eventual draft that you have. In July of 23rd, we brought this to the Planning Commission, an initial draft to discuss some potential changes. And then it was brought up actually by Skip that we should reach out to our chamber policy committee to use that as a resource since they're actively involved with businesses within our community. So we did do that in August 10th. Reaction from that committee was that they would like us to be, of course, flexible, sensitive to our business community, and to potentially streamline any permitting process. That's not a specific function that we would look at in our city code, but certainly something that we can take a look at our internal workings here at the city and what services we offer to our community. But the large theme was to be, as flexible as possible. Some of the committee members found that our codes were easy to use. However, they did suggest, as well as the Planning Commission suggested, that we reach out to sign companies to see what they're hearing from their clients. So we did do some additional research with, I think there were 4 or 5 Burnsville sign companies and provided that information. So kind of a range. It was a very small sample, but what we found out, most signs are under 100 square feet, largely either affixed to the wall, or some clients request that the banners are affixed to poles within someone's property. So kind of a mix, but it sounded like some of them felt our codes were easy to understand, and then some thought that other cities might be easier to interpret. Lakeville was one that came up twice within that research, and I jumped over to Lakeville's website, and sure enough, it's a very simplified ordinance. So we do want to, as a staff, want to take a closer look at that as an example, and maybe some other cities that we didn't take a look at to see how can we, again, simplify this. And then we brought this back in September to the Planning Commission with further refinement of the draft, which you have in your packets, and I'll go through that in a little bit more detail. So just as a quick summary of the types of temporary signs that we allow in Burnsville, we do allow so I should back up. We started really focusing on business banners, and that kind of bloomed into what else do we allow for temporary signs? What do we allow? What do we prohibit? What's the time frame that we allow? And how can we maybe cut some things out, move things around, and again, I'll say simplify again, how can we simplify this, make it user-friendly? So the types of temporary signs that we do allow business banners, and this gets into if a business moves out and they take their permanent wall sign with them, a new business moves in, they're under construction maybe, they're getting their new sign made. This particular business banner provision speaks to Regina's Kitchen restaurant, and it's a banner that would be allowed to be up for 90 days while I'm waiting for my permanent wall sign to come in. So that's the purpose of that. We allow new business banners or grand opening type signs. Those are allowed for up to 90 days, so you can come in for a permit for 60 days and get that extended to 30 days, so total 90 days. We allow employment signs, like now hiring type signs, in a banner format or a metal sign format, more of a freestanding type sign. We allow real estate, development project, and construction signs. So real estate signs, these are leasing signs that might be for a commercial building, for example. Typical, you'll see 32 square feet or 64 square feet, I believe, and a wood sign on skids or a wood post of some sort that's painted. Usually it's a real estate developer or an agent or a firm highlighting that space is for rent or sale. And then you have your development project signs, which highlight Regina's Kitchen coming soon, and it might have the contractors listed or just a rendering of what the restaurant might look like. And then construction signs, this is where you'll have a more temporary type sign, and it says the different contractors. Electrical contractor, maybe a contact information, might say coming soon, whatever project. So those are the types of signs that we want to simplify within the code. We do allow other types of temporary signs for special events, for our community and legacy events, for temporary sales, temporary seasonal sales like your pumpkin sales, Christmas tree sales, your garden sales. Transient merchant signs we allow, that's for fireworks displays typically. We allow sandwich boards, garage sale signs, and window signs. So those are just some different examples. But where we want to focus on making changes is to the items that are highlighted in yellow. So in your packet, the latest draft that was before the Planning Commission, I have not proposed any changes yet to that. We do want to make some changes, however, and are looking for feedback from the Economic Development Commission tonight. So your current red line draft speaks to removal of some items, removes condo banner references, employment banner references, and new business banner references as a definition. The hope is to reference those types of banners just as temporary banners. Another thing I haven't mentioned, we want to get away from referencing any content, reference to content, what goes in the sign. We want to focus more on the size of sign, the location of sign, and performance standards of the sign, rather than getting into what the sign says. Could get into legal issues with that. We want to remove a reference to security signs. We feel that we can accommodate that with existing language. For example, directional signs can accommodate this specific reference. There's some reference to some content language on the lease or open house signs. And again, we want to get away from that. The leasing banner section, so this is specifically to like multifamily apartment leasing. There's a table associated with that. Again, we want to group that into temporary banners instead and not specific to leasing. New business, grand opening, and temporary business signs, we want to, again, shift that to just temporary signs. Employment signs section, we want to remove that section entirely. And again, giving people the option to just have a temporary sign, no reference to what it is. So it could be, I want to use this for maybe to lease my space. I want to use this to identify my business name, or I want to identify that I'm having a sale, an event that day, and or that I'm now hiring. We don't want to tell people how they can use that space. So we would recommend to remove that entirely. And then condo banner section, again, allowing a more temporary banner, but not reference condos, so it would fall into that temporary category as well. And then we propose to add that category of temporary and temporary freestanding signs actually, and temporary banners as well. So creating definitions for that. We did get some feedback from the Planning Commission. We do reference some content within those definitions that we propose, so we're gonna rework some of that language before it comes back before the Planning Commission. And then we want to create new section in allowable and prohibited signs to reference the banners and freestanding signs. So basically creating these new sections. Like stated before, we want to get away from the content, so we need to refine some of that language. That's kind of our next steps, additional changes or future considerations. We want to simplify as much as we can, streamline, and make this user-friendly. So in your red line version, we don't touch upon the real estate and construction signs much. We, in my presentation to Planning Commission, I talked about that in front of you, and I've talked about it, but we didn't make a whole lot of changes in the draft, but we want to. And again, to simplify, to be more user-friendly, we found that some of that language is kind of conflicting as well. So as much as we can clean it up now, since we're in it, now's the time to do it in staff's opinion. And then we also want to analyze further the time frame that one's allowed to have a temporary banner up. Right now, we have for most cases, we have a 60-day time limit and then the 30-day extension, so a total of 90 days. Is that the right number? Should it be longer? Should it stay at 90 days? So I want to take the opportunity to talk with our code enforcement divisions, actually the ones that process these, issue the permits. So I want to have a conversation with them. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? As well as looking to our market cities and other cities as well to see is there a common time frame that we can maybe land on, somewhere in the middle. So next steps, certainly I'm looking for comments from you tonight, but the next steps with others include a check-in with City Council on December 13th at a work session. Staff, we need to refine certainly the items that I've highlighted tonight, and any additional feedback that I hear from you. Public hearings anticipated in early 2019, so the actual ordinance changes would go before Planning Commission and City Council eventually, and then 2019 City Council approval. With that, I'm certainly here to answer any questions, provide clarification, and take comments and suggestions.
Okay, great. Anybody have a question? Go ahead, Jason.
Were there any specific concerns that prompted this? Because I mean, it sounds like there was maybe general concerns, but there were any specific issues that prompted this change, proposed change?
So from my understanding, it was largely council direction. And I think there wasn't anything necessarily too specific, just if we're allowing this for schools, we want to be fair across the board, and the comments to staff is, you know, we should be looking at this to be flexible to our businesses as well. You know, over the years, we hear comments from sign companies, from businesses trying to work through the code, and sometimes there's some confusion or questions and things that need to be worked out. And as a staff, we want to be able to implement our codes and ordinances and be clear, and we want them to be user-friendly. So if staff has trouble interpreting and reading through it and communicating what the rules are, that's an issue. So the better we can simplify and make this more user-friendly, I mean, we'd certainly want to head that direction. But other than kind of the council directing us to take a look at this further, there wasn't like a big group coming to us saying we want to change. I mean, here and there you might hear something, but nothing substantial, I guess.
Commissioner DePaul?
Yeah,
I
no
have
questions.
questions too, but that's fine.
You already, I think, kind of addressed it with the first thing that really popped out to me was the definitions of the temporary freestanding sign and the temporary banner sign, because of the content. What is the thought? How are they going to be redefined? Do we know that? Because when I'm looking at it, it looks to me that the temporary sign definition itself would cover those two definitions already. So, I mean, is there any thought on how that's going to be redefined?
We definitely do want to redefine it, and unfortunately, I haven't given it much thought to put pen to paper to come up with a proposal. But yeah, we do want to remove any content reference.
Commissioner LaFarge?
So a few questions for you. So I'm trying to figure out what the appropriate way to address you is. Is it Planner Dean or Regina?
Regina's fine.
So I'm looking at this, and you're talking about simplification. And as I was joking before the meeting started, kudos to all the work that goes into this, because there's a lot of detail, really fine detail that you have to think through. So I wonder if what you're proposing accomplishes the simplification that you really desired, because it's still very complex.
So definitely we want to take a look at the real estate, the construction, the for lease signs. There's a lot of language in there that overlaps, that is somewhat contradictory or confusing. So that's something we need to work on. We are proposing to remove sections from the code referencing employment signs and some of the for lease references. So I think just taking that out will help simplify as well. We're getting there. I don't think we're 100% there yet, but we're getting closer.
The other question I had for now is about this temporary period of 90 days. You referenced it. You referenced whether or not it was the right amount of time and that you're looking for our input. So as I read the materials that were provided for tonight's meeting, it looked like there's banners that were 90 days. There's also real estate leasing signs, and of course, being in that business, that concerns me. And that looked like that also fell under the 90-day period, unless I didn't read that correctly. But I'm thinking about that, and I'm going, for new construction, commercial construction, it's certainly not unusual for something to take 4 months or 6 months or 9 months, and a bigger project a year. And so it would be appropriate, it would be nice to be able to promote it longer than 90 days, but I'm not so sure that a temporary sign should be up longer than 6 months either. But maybe there is a compromise based upon the size of the project, I'm not sure. The other thing is that from a leasing standpoint, a couple thoughts is that, number one, if you've got space, I mean, sometimes when you're marketing a piece of land, it can take years. And to go back and have to renew that every 90 days would be quite a hindrance, if I'm understanding that. Or if you have a building that you're leasing, it has a lot of vacancy, it could take 2 or 3 years to fill that building. Same thing. But at the same time, there are buildings that are full that still have leasing signs out that kind of pollute our city. And I don't like that. I was in South Dakota this last weekend to a city that's growing very fast in a couple streets, and I commented to my wife, I can't believe how many signs they have. It looks terrible. And so I'm all for cleaning things up, but at the same time, promoting business in a professional manner.
Anybody else have a question?
Part of it goes as it relates to the dynamic signs we go through here. Content is struck from a lot of that. Does that, it appears as though it's very hard and fast in regard to the, I believe it's 7-second change of these signs. If we remove content from there, just generic, the word content, does that open them up to be able to have more of a full motion dynamic sign if the content could change as long as the illumination and brightness and colors don't change along with it?
So as far as, so I would look at time, frequency, location, material standards as more of a performance standard. So I don't necessarily see that being an issue regarding removing content or referencing content in that specific case. Certainly, we're not proposing at this time to make any changes to our dynamic display section of our code. And that's something that we can certainly, look at in the future.
Okay, because it looked like, unless I read it wrong, that content was struck from those sections as well.
I'd have to take a closer look
No,
at
that's
that,
fine. I just
yeah.
didn't know if there was an intent to possibly loosen that ordinance up a little bit to make it, frankly, there's several full motion dynamic signs in Burnsville right now that I think have been done pretty well and aren't distracting. But are we trying to make that easier and utilize that median more, or was that not the intent?
If I could, Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
I believe our planning department commissioner, when they're referring to content, they're referring to language. And I think you're asking, and on the dynamic signs, are we looking at changing it so you can have dancing images and blowing up stars and that kind of thing? Is that correct?
No, I actually think that somebody with a dynamic sign may change the messaging on the sign more often than the every 7 seconds. And if we remove, if that's the intent to allow that, that's fine. I'm all for making this more simple for everyone. However, if they keep the color the same, it seems as though, based on how it's written, they may be able to change the messaging with a greater frequency and not violate the code then at that point.
I don't think that's the intent. Content is referring to the language, not the amount of time the dynamic sign can be there. So we're not looking to let you change it every 3 seconds, if that's what you're asking.
Right, but as I read it though, that's what I interpreted it as long as the the brightness of the sign, the colors of the sign, and a couple other things. Descriptors didn't change, the content may.
So we need to take a little
I
look
can
at
take a
the
closer
time,
look
the
at
time.
Right. Yep. Or and what that applies to. Otherwise, yeah, it's a lot of pages, and any reduction or simplification or moving any of these sign categories together would be great. I would also echo what Jeff said as well in regard to large projects can take 12 months, 18 months, 2 years to bring forth to completion, and we should be able to accommodate something if it's of that scale in the city.
Is that currently how it would work? Every 90 days, it would have to be renewed?
So specifically with real estate signs, construction signs, no permits required. It's, you can go install, you do have to meet city code. You know, we, certainly if there's a complaint, it's clear, obvious danger to, you know, from a life safety standpoint, we'll go investigate. But a lot of it's kind of on your honor. And so, and, you know, we're sensitive to the business needs in our community as well. But, you know, at the same time, there's the city code. So finding that happy medium and continuing to be sensitive, we really have to take a closer look at that, the real estate construction development type signs, because they're, like you said, they can range, or and then some people do take advantage of that too, and they may be marketing a property that's you know, for lease, but it's a property in maybe even a different city or different location. So yeah, a lot of it's kind of on your honor with some of the stuff.
Go ahead.
So I applaud trying to remove the content references, but I'm always trying to think about, you know, the worst side of the equation. What happens? So what happens if we remove that, and then all of a sudden somebody's out promoting something that's not family friendly? Do we now lose any teeth to be able to do anything about it?
That's a great question for our attorney. I mean, there are certain things that are protected, but I think I'd have to.
Maybe it's just a
yeah.
question that needs to be looked into.
I think so.
So as we're looking at to simplify the language structure, are we also looking to simplify like the fee structure? Because I'm looking at like our current temporary sign permitting application. It looks like we have a pretty complex fee system.
That's something that we haven't addressed at this point. I think it was something that was brought up by one of our planning commission members too. So I think at our discussion at the work session in front of city council, that's something that we can bring up to them to see if they want us to further look into that fee structure.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? I don't think you are requiring a motion from us. You were just looking for our feedback. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Next, we are going to move on to the 2019 legislative agenda. I believe Mr. Ninehouse is going to take care of that one tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Faulkner, our Community Development Director, is out today, so I'm going to do my best to fill in for her. As you noticed in your background, there actually are very little changes to our legislative agenda this year from last year, if you happen to remember last year. The agenda falls into three categories. One is our legislative priorities. These are the items that we will actively engage with our legislative officials on. The second category is supporting positions. These are basically positions that the city has taken, and if any organizations that the city belongs to, or if anybody asks us to go out and testify or write a letter of support or anything else, council is pre-approving staff to go ahead and do that. So when we get to the supporting positions, that's the difference between those two. And then monitoring, as it suggests, are some policies that the city has that staff just monitors anything that's going on at the legislature, and if something would happen or change relative to one of those positions, then staff would alert council and we would take some sort of step forward. I am only going to concentrate on items on the agenda that are relative to business. That's typically what we bring before this body. Under the legislative priorities, this one stays the same. We are basically advocating for the ability to close the freeway landfill and the freeway dump, and we are advocating that all the different tools that may be out there be available for us and let us use those tools to clean this dump. This one has been a legislative priority for the last couple of years, and it will continue to stay there until such time as we get these items cleaned up. As we move into the supporting positions, one that we're looking at is local land use controls. Basically here, the city is saying that we will be opposing any legislation that reduces our ability at the local level to have land use controls. A lot of the items that go before the Planning Commission would come under something like this. This one has also primarily been there in the past. The other supporting position relative to business is massage therapy establishments. The city is supporting an effort to have massage therapy be a statewide licensed. Right now it's licensed by the city. So what the massage people tell us is the rules have a tendency to be different from city to city, and many of them have multiple locations. And they have all told us over the years, we'd rather have a state licensing requirement, and then it's the same everywhere, and we just go and do it for the state. We are agreeing with them, and as long as it has some of the items that we have in our position statement that are also in our policies, we believe that's something that should happen, and we would do supporting efforts if that came before the legislature. The other item that is under our supporting positions is to keep the host community economic development grant. As you may remember, the city of Burnsville has an opportunity to get about a $415,000 per year grant from the state. We have primarily over the years, I believe we're in about the 5th or 6th year of this grant process, we have primarily used that grant for infrastructure improvements in heart of the city and MRQ. We are basically supporting that we want that to stay in there. As you may recall, that grant is only available to 2 cities, Burnsville and Inver Grove Heights. So there is typically pressure every year to either eliminate the grant and or expand the grant to other cities. And the grant is for those of us that have major landfills, and we're replacing some host money that we've lost out of the landfill. So we will just continue to support having that there. We also are supporting the continuation of all the typical development and redevelopment tools. So TIF and tax abatement, we're basically saying we want those tools, and we are also asking that we would support if the legislature wanted to bring back tools that there used to be in the past. There used to be things like this old shop and some different other types of tax credit tools. We're basically supporting the legislature giving us as many tools as possible to help with development and redevelopment. Another position that we will be supporting is basically eminent domain, and what we're saying here is if eminent domain was entered into and there was a lengthy legal process, is that we be able, if we are on the prevailing side, we be able to collect our cost of that. If the other side is prevailing, that they're only collecting reasonable cost. We have not, in my 13 years here at the City of Burnsville, used eminent domain. And I actually cannot remember the last time we've used eminent domain. So it's not something that we actually here in Burnsville encounter very often. As it relates to monitoring, we basically would monitor anything that the legislature might do to extend property taxes to more classes, basically increase any taxation levels. So we're saying keep everything the same. And then the last thing, or another item that we're looking at is monitoring daycare facilities and licensing. There has been in the past couple of legislative sessions, there has been some attempts and some talks to allow a daycare to be in a residential home in a neighborhood without the daycare provider living there. So it basically becomes a place of business that you go 10 hours a day or 12 hours, whatever, however you run the daycare. We believe if it's in a residential neighborhood, it should be in that resident's home, not people coming from the outside and running a business. If you want to run that type of a daycare, it would be our position that you go into one of our retail centers and run that type of a business if you're not living in your home. And then lastly, the city would monitor, there have also been in the past a couple of times when there was talk about changing the reseller legislation so that the police would be prevented from accessing the data that resellers collect. And resellers would be a pawn shop. And they collect information when they take goods in. Our police can monitor that data, and quite frankly, that is the way they sometimes find stolen items. So we would monitor, and if anything came up, we would go and testify that we're not in favor of that. Those are the legislative items, commissioners, that relate to business. If you have any questions about any of those, I would try my best to answer them. If not, I would just ask for a motion from the commission recommending that council move forward with the legislative agenda.
Commissioner LaFarge.
So, question related to the daycare facilities and licensing position. Right now, as I understand it, daycare, the term daycare covers both preschool-age children and senior age people as well that need daycare facilities. And I'm just wondering if in fact it includes senior care. I think there are a number of facilities already operating in residential areas. I'm not certain, they're probably more permanent than they are daycare per se, where they have, you know, professionals that come in and operate those during the day. What are your thoughts on that? Is there a need to separate that out as far as senior care, or do you feel like that fits appropriately in the way it's been bracketed here?
I'm sorry, Commissioner, you're now asking a question beyond my scope. This is not one of those that I have worked on. And you are correct. We do have senior care facilities where seniors are living 24/7, and nurses, chefs, things like that do come in. But certainly, if that is something that this commission thinks the council should address as more regulations on those, this would be the time to bring that forward.
Well, I was just maybe thinking the opposite, because I think a number of those that I'm aware of operate pretty effectively. And it's a nice, small environment for a lot of people that need maybe extensive care. And, you know, so now it's maybe 3 or 4 people to an occupant home and so forth. So it's a nice alternative for families that need that kind of care for their grandparent or parent or whatever. And so I just would want to make sure that we kind of, for those that are doing it right, and it's a good experience for families and makes it more affordable, that we don't prohibit that.
There is no intention to prohibit that.
Yeah.
I can tell you that.
Any other comments? Commissioner Copeland?
Hi, I thought the Freeway landfill was closed. Is it open? Are they still dumping there?
No.
Okay.
You know, no, the Commissioner, the discrepancy there is the owner feels that it was closed a long time ago. Mm-hmm. The MPCA does not agree with them that it was closed properly. And we have been in negotiations for years to come to a resolution to close it properly so that we can basically get it off the Superfund site and utilize it for development property.
Okay.
And our position is basically saying we're looking for whatever tools, as many tools, however we can do it to make it happen.
Okay.
Commissioner Folkstead,
yeah.
excuse me.
Nope. Just the very last one on the monitoring tracking position statements, the aggregate mining fee. Burnsville's pretty unique to have a aggregate mine in the middle of town. And I just didn't know, it seems to be targeted at roughly one business within the community. Have we spoken with them in regards to our position on placing a fee on their product?
Commissioner, we actually had our city council and our planning commission on a tour of both that and the landfill just this past week. And they are fully aware of our position. And we are in negotiations with them regarding host fees.
Okay.
Anybody else have a question, comment? As far as the grant, why is it just Inver Grove Heights and Burnsville?
Again, and it goes back to when we started getting less host fees. These two cities, we went and lobbied for this grant, and we have much larger landfills than other cities, so it's specific to us. It's specific to the two cities that believe that as long as a large landfill exists in our community, it does have some hampering effect on development. Obviously, that's a piece of the MRQ that we're not developing. So that's why it was put for those two specific cities.
That makes sense, definitely. Anybody else have anything? I believe you were looking for, a vote from us at all on this?
Correct, Mr. Chair. We'd be looking for a motion for city council to adopt.
To adopt. Do I have a motion for city council to adopt the legislation agenda as listed?
Can we make a motion to adopt it as
Yeah.
listed with consideration of the comments that we've made?
Okay, is that your motion?
That's my motion.
Motion made. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion and second on the table. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next on our list, that's with you, Mr. Ninehouse, again,
I
is.
believe the rest of the meeting is mine, Mr. Chair.
It is. So, review the greater MSP.
Typically, once a year, we bring before you a review of the efforts of Greater MSP. As noted in your background, Burnsville has been a investor in Greater MSP since its inception. We invest $25,000 a year. For last year, 2017, those are the latest total numbers available to us from Greater MSP. Within the region, Greater MSP had 17 projects that resulted in 1,800 new jobs and $163 million worth of capital investment. They also tracked 763 business visits. A couple of years ago, they started a procedure where everybody submits business visits through a software package they have, and the idea is to make sure that certain businesses aren't getting visits from everyone and being inundated. Just to put it in perspective, last year, the city of Burnsville had 80 of those visits, so about a little over 10% of Greater MSP's efforts. You may not remember, but Greater MSP was actually a key team member in us getting the Super Bowl that was held here in January. They participated very heavily on that. Of those 17 projects last year, 9 of those projects were attraction of new business to the region. 8 of the projects were assisting in an expansion of a business within the region. As I mentioned, we do contribute $25,000 per year to Greater MSP. During our 8 years of investments, we have actually received no projects. No projects have come to Burnsville. We have had 3 visits where someone has come and looked at a site or sites in Burnsville. Obviously, none of those have resulted in an attraction. As you know, and we'll later on in this meeting, we'll be looking at our new economic development strategic plan. As you also know, one of the items in that plan is a lot more marketing and a lot more staff attendance at different conferences, especially national conferences. At this point, council is looking at utilizing the $25,000 that had been an investment to Greater MSP and sliding that over and utilizing that for staff to go to different conferences. And we will be working next year on what those conferences will be. So in effect, what the council is saying is we'd like to see what happens if we send our staff to national conferences instead of contributing to Greater MSP staff going to national conferences. I will certainly stand for any questions about what's been going on with Greater MSP if the commission has any.
So it sounds like we're shifting our 25,000 off of Greater MSP and using it for our own use.
Correct.
Any comments, questions?
I have a comment. This is one I struggle with a little bit because I know how important a single voice for our region is. It's a much more efficient model, which is how Greater MSP was born. It's a model that in creating that efficiency, it has made it more cost-effective for all communities to participate. And in many respects, I'm a big fan of it. At the same time, I know that we have not had direct benefit because we're a fully developed city, but we certainly have had a lot of indirect benefit. Just the Super Bowl alone contributed significantly to the revenues in our hotels and restaurants, which we can prove out. So I struggle with that. So if in fact our plan is to now start to get into the recruiting business by ourselves, which sets a precedent for potentially other cities to fragment Greater MSP, that's a concern for me. If it's taking these funds to train our people to be more effective at what they're doing and to allow us to do more things on the economic development side to benefit our city directly, I'm all in support of it. But I don't like the idea of us now starting to get in the business recruiting business outside of our state, perhaps, or certainly our metropolitan area and competing against Greater MSP. And I don't know if that's what you meant, but I maybe heard that a little bit.
Commissioner, what council is proposing is that $25,000 be used for staff to attend conferences. And yes, we would be promoting the city of Burnsville at those conferences. I guess I don't view that as being in competition with Greater MSP. They're probably going to be at some of the same conferences promoting the region. I don't know if I'm answering your question. But yes, we're going to be going.
And again, I have no problems with us being able to go to conferences that benefit our economic development efforts and our education around that. But I don't want to be spending those funds to be in direct competition with Greater MSP and their efforts. I would rather we put those funds into the education, attending conferences, fine, and into programs to help our economic development efforts. I don't want us to be going to conferences not for the educational purposes, but purely for recruiting purposes like Greater MSP does now, where they may go to Europe for a medical device conference or something. And to me, that seems counterproductive.
We'll certainly note your comments, but absolutely, the intent right now is for us to go to these conferences to be promoting Burnsville and recruiting businesses. These are not for educational purposes. We will not, however, be going to a conference in Europe.
Are there?
They will be in the United States.
Need a bigger budget.
Go ahead, Commissioner Faulkner.
I guess I like the idea. I see it as an opportunity to highlight Burnsville specifically in the metro area and the things that we have to offer. I think, there are good things about promoting the region as a whole. It seems as though we've spent a couple $100,000 doing that over the past 8 years, and we haven't necessarily seen a tangible benefit to landing a project within Burnsville, and to shift those resources to try to better highlight and showcase what Burnsville has to offer. These potential businesses coming to town, especially as we look at revamping and expanding our own economic development process here in town. I think letting these major employers know about that is a good thing. So I would support moving these funds from the more regional investment to specific investment in promotion of Burnsville.
And if I could, Mr. Chair, this may shed some light on your concerns, Commissioner. One of the conferences that we know we will be targeting is the International Retailers Conference. We will be there specifically hoping to showcase Burnsville to various franchise types of retailers and restaurants. That is typically not something that Greater MSP would be going after. Typically, Greater MSP is going to be going after a large, major corporation. We're looking at more going to the bigger conferences and letting people know that Burnsville exists. For example, we do go to a local conference put on by MNCAR, which is the Association of Commercial Realtors. We're looking at going to some conferences similar to that, promoting to a larger broker, developer type community. We know we're not going to land a business looking for 150,000 square feet of space because, quite frankly, we don't have that space to give them. We're looking at getting our name out for those somewhat smaller types of items. So I don't think we'll very often actually compete with Greater MSP. We could potentially on one here or there. I'd never say we won't. But we're kind of looking at a slightly different target market, and in some cases, we're looking at some categories that Greater MSP typically does not look to go after. They're not going to, for example, Chick-fil-A that came to town a couple of years ago. That Greater MSP is not trying to cultivate the Chick-fil-A franchise organization. So hopefully maybe that clarifies it a little bit.
Are there other larger cities in the Twin Cities that are not a part of Greater MSP? They go off on their own, like we're proposing to do?
Depending on your definition of larger, I will tell you
Or
this.
cities.
The vast majority of cities in the metropolitan area are not investors in Greater MSP. Off the top of my head, I would say at most there may be 20.
Okay.
Almost all the counties are investors. And in some cases, I think the cities feel as long as the county is investing. Dakota County is also investing in Greater MSP. Prior to us leaving next year, Dakota County had 5 cities that were contributors. That was more cities than any other county, except for Scott County. But in Scott County actually pays the price for all of their cities to be considered as contributors, as opposed to in Dakota County, each one of the contributing cities pays their own fair share.
How is the council going to measure the success of this?
I'm sorry, I missed your question.
How is the council going to measure the success of this trial period? Like, how are they going to measure whether the city is going to retain projects or businesses?
They're going to be looking at, do we in fact get any businesses because we've been at a conference? I can tell you, Commissioner, that it's not a go to a conference and in the next 6 months a business comes to Burnsville because we talked to them at the conference. This is more of a long-term, it's more of a marketing type effort in being out and getting the city in front of people. But we will try and ascertain if we're at these conferences, or does that then result in business coming to Burnsville that would not have come to Burnsville if we weren't there? And obviously, if a period of time goes by and nothing is changing, there would be no reason to continue to send us to national conferences. As you're well aware, our council is very conservative on how we spend money.
For $25,000, how many opportunities to attend conferences do we feel this provides?
I believe, Commissioner, I have a list of about 5 or 6 that we might target. And we haven't actually decided yet on which conferences those would be.
Okay.
But this is not going to send us to a lot of
That's what I was thinking,
we
yeah.
go, obviously, if we leave the state, we have airfare, hotel, and all of that, and plus the fee to get into the conference.
Okay.
Commissioner Copeland?
I like it. I like Greater MSP, but I also think we need to have Burnsville being touted. My question would be, do you already have the booths, or is that something that you're going to have to spend money on?
We possess a sign.
Okay.
So yes, we will, some of that $25,000 the first year will go to, it may not, it probably will not be a full booth, but it will be something. as you're probably well aware of, we have a company in town that makes exhibit booths, and some very big ones.
Two, don't we?
Yes, we do. And one of them does have a rental type program. We'll probably try and utilize that program. But we do not have a great big booth
Right.
or anything right now. And
I
we're
didn't
not
think so.
looking to get that kind of space at a conference to have a booth.
No, but you need pictures and
Yes.
maps and
Yes.
visual.
Yeah, and that would be more done either by our communications department, or, as you know, when we get to our ED strategic plan, we are also looking at having a marketing consultant help us out. So we'd look for them to do that, but we'd probably engage an exhibit company to give us a few more structural things that will, bring some light.
Okay.
And since you brought it up, Commissioner, the other thing that we would probably wrap into this is that while we have invested over the years in various pieces of promotional swag, they have usually been a little bit on the less expensive side. We'll probably look at a little bit nicer swag at a nicer conference. So instead of spending 79 cents, we might jump all the way up to $1.75 or $2.
If it's not something they're going to keep or take, it doesn't matter what it costs. It could be 25 cents, but if nobody's going to take it.
Absolutely.
What was the initial reason we decided to start contributing to Greater MSP to begin with, the $25,000?
When Greater MSP was started, their initial emphasis was to get private financing. They also had a select handful of cities that they approached the first year. We were one of those cities. I think Egan was also approached and did it, and I believe Apple Valley was approached and did it. And I think initially those were the only cities in Dakota County that were approached, but I might be wrong on the cities. But there was just a small, and I mean, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Bloomington, obviously the much larger cities were in that picture. And then they slowly, over time, have talked with other cities. And some cities have actually, like some private entities, have just literally come to them and said, we'd like to be an investor.
So they've grown from the inside already, basically.
Absolutely. I believe that their budget the first year was somewhere in about the $4 million range, and it's now somewhere in about the $6 million range.
Okay. Any other comments or questions, or? So we're looking to make a recommendation to City Council.
Was there any action item on here?
You don't have
Oh,
to
we're not? Okay.
necessarily make a motion, Mr. Chair.
Well, then I guess we're moving on. Review to open to business.
Once again, Commissioners, we attempt on a yearly basis to review our Open to Business program. Just a quick reminder, Open to Business is a partnership between the Dakota County CDA and the cities in Dakota County. Dakota County CDA pays half of the $140,000 a year investment in Open to Business. Each of the other cities pay based on the number of residents. Our fee is $8,300 a year. So far this year, in the first 16 months, our Open to Business consultant has had 17 new clients here in Burnsville and has had 82 new clients across the county. When you look at those 82 clients countywide, 24 of them are pre-startup, which means these are people that have an idea that they want to go into business. 13 of them are in the startup phase, so they've hooked up with our consultant, and she is working them through how to get their business up and running. 28 are existing companies that have a new opportunity they would like to go after, and the consultant is working with them on either a marketing plan or a strategic plan to go after that new opportunity. And then 17 of them in the county are existing businesses that have some sort of a challenge. In many cases, it's a financial challenge. And again, the consultant is working with them to overcome what that challenge is and obviously keep them in the county and in existence. Our investment, again, in 2019 will be the $8,300. It is in the budget for 2019. And I think this one has proven over time to be a very good investment for $8,300. I will also tell you that typically the city of Burnsville will come in number 1 or number 2 for a number of new clients that the consultant works with. And I, quite frankly, would attribute that to the fact that our communications department actually does an excellent job of marketing this program on a year-long basis. And again, Mr. Chair, I would certainly stand for any questions the commission has.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Commissioner Newman?
Are there any cities within Dakota County that don't contribute to
No.
Open to Business?
I think it seems like a worthwhile program. It's a nice resource to have out there, especially for some of the smaller businesses, and it's a relatively small investment on an annual basis from the city. I guess I would motion to recommend that we continue our participation and our present level of funding in the program for 2019.
I'd second that.
So motion and it's been seconded. Any other comments, questions, concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing no one. Final piece of the action item is the review the Economic Development Strategic Plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You received the plan in your packet. There is really nothing in the plan that has changed from about a month ago when you and the EDA reviewed it. So when I go through it, I will basically go through it fairly quickly. Certainly, if any commissioners have any comments or questions, we'd like to get them now, and then at the end, we'd like a recommendation for the EDA to adopt this plan. Just a little quick background. We started this, back at the beginning of summer with a ULI meeting, and when we talked about all the demographics and everything else. Phone interviews were done with both this group and the EDA. We had 2 work sessions with the EDC and the EDA in which we crafted out the plan. And then there were some check-in sessions with the EDC and the EDA as we went through to craft this plan. The plan has goals, strategies, and action and tactics, and I'm going to just quickly go through goals and strategies. Goal number 1 is to ensure the sustainability of the Burnsville Shopping Center and County Road 42. Short term, we want to have a formal plan, establish the guides redevelopment in this corridor. As you know, we are right in the process of working on that right now. Our Burnsville Center, County Road 42 redevelopment plan, which we hope to have adopted in December, and this group has been part of that. Long term, goal would be Burnsville Shopping Center is repositioned for future sustainability, and occupancy along County Road 42 has increased. We will measure our performance against those goals by property value increases at the mall and surrounding area, new business startups and remodels in the redevelopment area, public investment in infrastructure and/or public-private partnerships in the area, and the number and type of building permits and valuation of those permits. The strategies that we're looking at are complete the Burnsville County Road 42 Master Redevelopment Plan. As I said, that should be adopted in December. Strategy number 2, engage mall ownership and development community to explore feasible repositioning opportunities. We are actually doing that right now. Number 3, develop a reinvestment strategy that identifies public investment and resources required to facilitate private investment. Number 4, identify transit-oriented design area around the new transit stop and corridor. That will be part of the plan. Number 6 is establish a formal system to inform and engage businesses along County Road 42 corridor. And number 6, develop wayfinding around traffic congestion on County Road 42. That's all the strategies relative to our first goal. Those have not changed since we looked at them about a month ago. If the commission has any questions or comments, I would certainly take them.
Anyone have any questions, comments? No concerns?
Goal number 2 is to improve the image of School District 191 and the city. Short-term goal, routine meetings between the school district board and city staff, and a minimum of an annual meeting between the full school board and city council. Long-term, current and future residents of the city move viewing into the city and within the School District 191 as a positive, and realtors promote purchasing homes within Burnsville and within School District 191. We will measure our performance by the number of meetings, attendance at meetings, and outcomes met. change in enrollment and increase in school performance measures, survey results measuring perception, list of sites ready for development that were promoted within and outside of Burnsville, increase in tax base relative to existing tax base, and number of site search or developer inquiries. And the strategies for this goal actually are quite extensive. Number one, engage School District 191 in meaningful dialogue to discuss issues and how the city can assist them. Number two, embrace and actively engage with school board, council, and business community to build relationships. Number three, identify households and populations within the district and engage the school district on their information to identify fact-based issues and impacts. Four, identify areas within the community for redevelopment to improve visual image. Five, develop a communications plan to more fully promote the city and inform residents and surrounding metropolitan area of the positive attributes and strides made within the community. Six, enhance existing communication tools, website, social media, et cetera, to assist in engagement. I should inform the commission we are actually in the process of completely redoing our website, and hopefully sometime before the end of the year we'll unveil the new website. Number seven, develop informational opportunities and programs to provide factual, positive information about the School District 191 and the city. 8, establish a formal system to solicit stakeholder, which would be residential, business, property owner, school district, and real estate groups, feedback concerning community opportunities. Number 9, actively celebrate success in the School District 191 and the community through press releases, websites, social media outlets, and council comments. And lastly, number 10, establish neighborhoods to promote pride and internal image enhancement. Again, these have not changed from a month ago when we took a look at all of those, but if the commission has any comments or questions, I would certainly take them.
Anybody?
One thing on this I was thinking about, this is a lot of heavy lifting as far as the school district, because it's one thing to market it, but ultimately the main thing is that the performance within the school and test scores need to be better. And that's something that we don't have direct control over, the school district does, but it's really significant to make progress in this area. I was in a meeting just a couple weeks ago, I guess it was, for the Greater Twin Cities YMCA on the board, and we were talking about the way the Y can improve their outreach into the community and help with some of these learning gaps that are occurring in our society, not just in Burnsville, but throughout the United States, certainly in our metropolitan area. And we were talking about how active a lot of our senior citizens are within the Y. I think there was 90,000 senior citizen members in the Y in the Twin Cities, and how many of them are just wonderful people that have adhered to a workout regimen, and they're disciplined people and really wonderful people that you'd be proud to call your grandparent if you were a young kid. And we were talking about, is there a way to engage some of these senior citizens who are looking for more engagement in their lives? And as a community, I wonder if there's something we can do around that to help with some of these kids that are coming from English as a second language home, or dual parents that are working significant hours to keep food on the table and could use some more help with homework and a grandparent type person to be in their lives. And I'm just wondering, as a city, if there's something more that we could possibly do around some of this to help the school district even more. And again, it's something that's not in our direct control, but maybe that's an area that is in our direct control that could help.
Certainly that's an idea, I think, as we roll out the plan, Commissioner, that could be discussed and addressed. And yes, if there's something we could do. I think what this plan is saying is the city is willing to help in any way they can the school district overcome the misperception that exist out there.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to want it. We have to encourage them to want it. I mean, that's part of our.
Correct.
Do we currently meet with the school or the staff?
Our Chamber of Commerce, I believe it was at the beginning of this year, or possibly, Commissioner, at the end of last year, has started. I believe it's about every other month, and I think they call it a leadership breakfast, where school board, city council, and chamber board all meet in a breakfast setting and discuss different items. So there's a little bit of that. I think as we head forward in our plan, we might want to tighten that up even tighter, maybe more at the actual staff level. You know, there's no reason why our communications department shouldn't be even conversing with their communications department even more than they do now. And certainly other staff here may want to, be more engaged with their staff. I think that's what we're looking at. But yes, our chamber has kind of led an effort to get some of that moving forward, at least at the commission or at the council board level.
Anyone else have questions or comments on this?
No, I like this goal. I think it's great. I think it's very cohesive for the community as a whole to start celebrating each other, the city and the school, and whatever misperception there is out there for our school obviously reflects on the city, and to do everything we can to promote them and the good things that are happening and help them through some of the challenges is good. I mean, realistically, the school has been and will continue to be the biggest economic driver within the city as far as people moving to town, and we need as the Economic Development Commission, we need to do everything we can to help promote and assist this economic asset within the community. So this is good that this particular section is very extensive as far as the strategies and all of the actions that can be taken. I appreciate that.
And if I could, Mr. Chair,
Sure.
I probably should. This past Saturday, the Chamber, School District, and City held the first ever Family Fest. The City and the Chamber used to do a home improvement show, and we've now transitioned to a Family Fest. It was held at Burnsville High School. We estimate around about 1,100 attendees, counting children, were in attendance. I was there. I can tell the commission that what I thought was very nice and very interesting is there were a lot of young families with young kids. So we were able to expose the high school and the Pathways program and everything else, and kind of set the stage that as you go through the grades here in the Burnsville School District, when you get here to the Burnsville High School, you're going to have some opportunities to learn about trades, get college credits and everything else. We also obviously showcased other types of businesses and different nonprofits in the city also. I believe we've already picked a date for next year. I think it's the same Saturday in October to do this again, and hopefully with a larger attendance. So we're moving, and again, this was primarily on the direction of our Chamber of Commerce. They really kind of carried the heavy water on this event. And I think we're going to be able to help showcase, and the more we get folks into the Burnsville High School and actually see what's going on there, I think some of the misperceptions that we all know exist, hopefully it will slowly change. We do recognize it's obviously going to be a long process to change the perception.
That's great. Thank you. Anybody else have anything?
Goal number 3 is to continue development within the heart of the city. Short term, remaining vacant lots in Heart of the City 1 are developed, and development begins on Heart of the City 2. I can tell you that there's 2 vacant lots in Heart of the City 1 that probably will both by next spring have construction going on them. You're aware of both of them. The Chase project over on Nicolay Plaza and the Roars project on our AAA land. Long-term, updated plan for Heart of the City 2 with first development commencing. Our performance will be measured by market value growth, number of housing units built, and square footage of commercial built. Strategies towards this goal are facilitate development of remaining sites in HOC 1 through discussions with existing property owners and potential developers. I can tell you we are working on that strategy right now. Number 2, facilitate development approval changes as necessary to encourage high amenity apartments. Number 3, review development plan for HOC 2 to determine relevance and refine as needed. Number 4, actively market to potential developers development potential within HOC 2. And the last strategy under this goal, provide financial assistance to the extent necessary to assist in promoting development and redevelopment. Again, nothing has changed from when we reviewed these a month ago, but I would certainly answer if you had any questions or take any comments.
Does anyone have any comments or questions? That one's pretty straightforward.
Goal number 4 is to enhance and build awareness around the city's existing housing and commercial programs and develop new programs as appropriate. Short-term goal, increase use of housing and commercial programs. Long-term, improved and stabilized housing and commercial properties. Our performance metrics, utilization of resources and our programs, number of people using open to business, for example. Housing stock reinvestment, measured by permit and valuation. Dollars leveraged by city investment, and number of businesses recognized. Strategies, prepare inventory of all existing housing and business programs. Evaluate effectiveness of current housing and business programs and refine or eliminate as appropriate. Number 3, assess current housing and business needs within the community and update program offerings to meet current needs. Number 4, work with Dakota County CDA to assist in developing and/or providing funding for programs. Number 5, develop marketing and communications plans regarding resources for housing and business. Number 6, determine resources necessary to fund programs and staffing to create and implement programs. And number 7, identify redevelopment opportunities within the city for residential or business development. Again, nothing's changed since when you saw it last month, but I would certainly answer any questions or take any comments.
Questions, comments? No?
Final goal, continue the city's position as a regional destination. Short-term would be develop brand for the city. Long-term, city is viewed as a regional destination for outdoor recreation, entertainment, and shopping. Our metrics, number of visits with Convention and Visitors Bureau data, and attendance at city events. Burnsville Shopping Center and County Road 42 corridor seen as a regional driver. Increased entertainment venues and other amenities. Population growth. Market value, tax base growth. Number of jobs in the community. Decrease in median age and utilization of city facilities and park amenities. Our strategies are develop a brand for the city that builds upon its positive aspects, unique character, and leverages natural assets. Number 2, promote outcome of Burnsville Shopping Center and County Road 42, study for a repositioned area that keeps the city viewed as a destination hub. Number 3, work with the Chamber and Experience Burnsville to explore possibilities to promote the city as more than a tourist or shopping destination. Number 4, develop a communications plan to more fully promote the city and inform residents and surrounding metropolitan area of positive attributes within the community. And lastly, number 5, promote connectivity of the city to the metro area and its assets. Again, nothing changed from when we reviewed last month, but once again, if you have any comments, I would certainly take those or questions.
Anyone?
The only thing I saw in here is one of the metrics was number 8, utilization of city facilities and park amenities. And I'm wondering if that should be broader than that, where we recognize that Buck Hill is a significant amenity to this area. Some of the regional biking that is now coming in our community is significant outdoor activity. And also the lakes in this area. I wonder if those should be included as well from a utilization standpoint.
We can certainly pass that comment on as we move forward, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Folkstead?
Motion to.
If I could stop you for just a minute, Commissioner. I do feel, especially for people at home, I believe all of you have seen the 10-year financial plan for our strategic plan. Mm-hmm. I will remind you that this plan calls for the hiring of another economic development person, and it also calls for some marketing consulting help, plus some of the other things we've talked about. That is going to be paid for by paying down the fund balance and the EDA balance over the next 10 years. Also, as a reminder, for a number of years, every year we've added an additional $25,000 to the EDA fund. Starting in 2020, that number will be $35,000. So in effect, we will add an additional $10,000 to the EDA fund every year beyond what we typically have done in the past to accomplish the strategic plan. And I just want to, I know there's always questions about, this seems like a lot of stuff, how are you going to pay for it? And fortunately enough for us, we actually have a balance that we can utilize to pay for it. And then I believe I prevented the commissioner from making a motion.
Commissioner Newman has something.
Well, before we go into that, is the staff comfortable with those resources to ensure that these strategies are implemented?
Absolutely, Commissioner.
I guess the other question, in looking at the spreadsheet we have before us, the transfer to the Ames Center for debt at $410,000 for next year. Budget for 2018 was $498,000, and the years previous were also larger than that. Is there a reason why that's less, or if you could clarify if I've missed why that's less?
Thank you, Commissioner. As I understand it from our finance department, the amount of funds we need on a yearly basis going forward to pay off our bond debt for the Ames Center is decreasing. That's what's caused there. So yes, in the past, we were paying $498. As we go forward, we'll only be paying $410. It's simply it's a math thing.
Okay.
But obviously, the lion's share of our budgets every year has actually been for the payment of the bonds on the Ames Center.
Yes, it has. Outside of that, I guess, looking at the rest of the plan with the various suggestions that have been made here today, I would motion to recommend the approval of the Economic Development Commission or Economic Development Strategic Plan going forward.
All right, sounds like we have a motion. I have a second? Is that a motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Okay, well, we have a motion, we have a second. Any comments, questions, concerns?
I just think it's wonderful. I think it's a lot of work that's gone into this by a lot of people, and I think it's really exciting to see this plan come out the way it has and the way it's been defined and prioritized. I think it's very exciting.
It is an exciting time to be on the EDC, that's for sure. Any other comments, questions, concerns before we go to a vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? I don't hear anybody. I believe that is the end of our agenda.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn by Commissioner Newman. Any seconds?
I'll second.
Does anybody want to talk about this at all? Have any comments, questions? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Good. And we're done.
Thank you, Commissioners.